So let's start. Number 10, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Most people have heard of it. Most people picture a floating island of plastic bottles you could practically walk across. That's not what it is. That's exactly the problem. It's twice the size of Texas, but you could sail directly through it and not immediately realize you were in it. It isn't an island. It's a soup of microplastics suspended through the water column, invisible, everywhere, in every direction around you without a single visible sign that anything is wrong. And it's moving up the food chain. The fish eat it. You eat the fish. Scientists have already found it in human blood. It cannot be cleaned up. The technology simply doesn't exist. It is just there, growing, and it has been for decades. Number 9. The undersea rivers of the Black Sea. There are rivers on the bottom of the ocean, not metaphorical rivers, not a poetic way of describing currents. Actual rivers with their own banks, their own currents, their own waterfalls and rapids. If you could drain the ocean away, you would see them sitting there exactly like rivers on land. Here's what's inside them. The water is so dense and so completely stripped of oxygen that nothing survives in it. No fish, no plants, no bacteria, nothing. Just cold, dead water moving silently in one direction along the ocean floor. Anything that falls in gets carried, preserved, going nowhere useful, forever. These rivers have been flowing down there in total darkness, completely unwitnessed by anything alive for thousands of years. The ocean has rivers. It never once felt the need to tell us. Number 8. The zone of death in the Baltic Sea. Nothing dramatic happens at the surface. The water looks gray and unremarkable. There are no warning signs, no visible indication that anything is wrong. It looks like every other stretch of cold northern ocean you've ever seen. Underneath it, the oxygen is simply gone. The Baltic Dead Zone is one of the largest oxygen-depleted areas in the world. The seafloor inside it is a graveyard. No movement, no scavengers picking things apart, no decomposition, just sediment and the remains of things that wandered in and never came back out. And it grows. Every single year it gets larger. Here's the part that should bother you. This isn't a natural phenomenon. It was created. Human activity did this to an entire section of ocean, and it is still expanding, quietly, invisibly, from underneath. Number 7. The maelstroms of Saltstraumen, 400 million cubic meters. That is how much water gets forced through a narrow Norwegian channel 4 times every single day. Read that number again. The whirlpools it creates are large enough to swallow boats whole, not tip them, not damage them, swallow them. The suction develops in seconds, and it pulls downward with a force that makes human swimming ability completely and utterly irrelevant. There is no fighting it. There is no swimming against it. By the time you feel it pulling you down, you are already gone. It doesn't announce itself either. The water goes from fast to catastrophic in moments. There is no buildup, no warning, just water and then suddenly something much worse than water. Local fishermen have scheduled their entire lives around its activation cycle for generations. They know exactly when it turns on. They respect it completely. Tourists find out a different way. Number 6. The acidic lakes of the Gulf of Mexico. Sitting on the floor of the Gulf of Mexico are lakes, not a metaphor, not a geological term for something that looks lake-adjacent. Actual lakes with their own shorelines, their own wave patterns, their own distinct surface sitting quietly inside the ocean like they belong there. They don't. The water inside them is a brine so chemically hostile that it stuns and kills almost anything that enters it within seconds. The footage exists. You can watch it. Fish swim up to the edge, cross the boundary, and go rigid, dead before they can turn around. These lakes have been sitting there for thousands of years, perfectly still, perfectly silent, perfectly deadly, a private body of water at the bottom of the ocean with nothing alive inside, and no intention of changing that. The boundary between the lake water and the ocean is about a foot wide. On one side, everything lives. Step across it and you have about 3 seconds to regret it. Number 5. The Blue Hole of Dahab. Divers travel from every country in the world to dive this site specifically, and you can see why. Electric blue water, extraordinary visibility, walls of coral dropping into impossible depth. It is genuinely one of the most beautiful underwater locations on Earth. People see photographs of it and immediately start planning trips. Here's what they're planning trips to. It has one of the highest diver fatality rates of any location on the planet. The exact number of deaths is unknown, because not all of the bodies have been recovered from the bottom. At around 56 meters, there is an underwater arch that divers attempt to swim through. Many don't make it. The depth triggers nitrogen narcosis, a state of disorientation so complete that divers have been filmed calmly swimming downward into the dark instead of up toward the surface. They looked peaceful. That's the part that stays with you. The locals call it the diver's graveyard. They have been calling it that for years. The dive boats still go out every single morning. Number 4, the toxic brine pools that pickle you alive. Imagine finding a lake at the bottom of the ocean. It has its own surface, its own stillness, its own clearly defined edge where it meets the water around it. It looks almost peaceful, calm in a way that the rest of the ocean never really is. That stillness is the problem. The brine inside is 5 times saltier than the surrounding seawater and saturated with methane and hydrogen sulfide. It doesn't just kill things that enter it, it preserves them intact, indefinitely. The chemistry of the water acts on organic matter the same way pickling works in a jar on your kitchen shelf. Researchers have found sea creatures inside brine pools that weren't decomposed, weren't scattered, just preserved, suspended in the exact position they were in when the water got them. The line between the brine and the ocean is called the brine-seawater interface. It is roughly a foot wide. Everything on one side is alive and fine. Everything on the other side will stay exactly as it is forever. There is no recovering anything that goes in. It just stays there, perfectly preserved, perfectly still, at the bottom of the ocean where nobody will ever find it. Number 3, the boiling hydrothermal vents. The footage is spectacular. Jets of superheated water erupting from the seafloor surrounded by pale, ghostly creatures clinging to the rocks. It looks like another planet. People watch documentaries about hydrothermal vents and think they look extraordinary. Scientists get genuinely excited about them. Here is what is actually coming out of the ground. The water exceeds 400 degrees Celsius. The only reason it doesn't instantly vaporize everything around it is the crushing deep ocean pressure holding it together in a liquid state. Remove that pressure and it would explode outward instantly. The water is also saturated with toxic minerals and chemicals that would destroy human tissue through multiple mechanisms simultaneously. The temperature would actually be the least of your problems. And yet, things live here. Creatures that exist absolutely nowhere else on Earth evolved specifically to survive in this environment. Tube worms, blind shrimp, things that have never seen sunlight and never needed to. The ocean took a place that should be completely uninhabitable by any reasonable definition and quietly built an entire neighborhood in it. It does what it wants. Number 2, the Challenger Deep's crushing void. 11 kilometers. That is how far down it goes. To put that number into something your brain can actually process, if you dropped Mount Everest into the Challenger Deep, the summit would still be sitting more than a mile underwater. The whole mountain, buried. Here is what exists at the bottom. The pressure exceeds 1,000 times normal atmospheric pressure. At that depth, the human body doesn't simply die. The air spaces inside you collapse inward. Lungs, sinuses, ears. Everything that relies on having space inside it gets compressed into something unrecognizable. It happens fast. Only 3 people in all of human history have reached the bottom. The moon has been visited by more humans than the deepest point of our own ocean. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of what is down there. Whatever lies at the bottom of the Challenger Deep has had millions of years completely undisturbed. It has never seen us coming. It still hasn't. Number 1, Point Nemo, the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. If something went wrong right now and you needed help, how far away is the nearest person? A few streets, maybe a few miles at most. Now imagine the answer to that question is 2,600 kilometers in every direction, simultaneously. That is Point Nemo. It is the most remote location on the surface of the entire Earth. The nearest land in any direction is over 2,600 kilometers away. When vessels pass through this area, the closest human beings are frequently the astronauts aboard the International Space Station passing silently overhead. If something goes wrong at Point Nemo, no rescue is coming. The distances involved make emergency response not difficult but functionally meaningless. You are further from help than any other coordinate that exists on this planet. NASA uses it as a spacecraft graveyard. They deliberately crash their decommissioned satellites and space stations here because they know with complete certainty that nothing will ever disturb them. The loneliest place on Earth is a cemetery for the most advanced machines humans have ever built, and beneath all of it is just water, going down forever.